Welcome to the International Lawyers Network's webinar series. Today we have our second webinar with David Ackert, Effective Client Site Visits. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before I introduce David. We are recording today's webinar and I'll distribute that recording tomorrow. And if you would like to ask questions at any time during the presentation, everyone is muted, so you can use the chat box, which you'll find an icon for on your screen, and we'll take those at the end. Our speaker today is David Ackert, MA. He has over 15 years of experience as a business development consultant to lawyers. He's personally developed and implemented client development programs for hundreds of firms, from regional boutiques to some of the top AmLaw 100s. Through his company, Ackert Inc., he has created award-winning platforms including Practice Boomers, an e-learning program that teaches rainmaking to lawyers, and Practice Pipeline, a platform that helps lawyers keep their most important relationships top of mind. You can learn more about his programs at ackertinc.com. David's work has garnered press from such publications as the LA Times, the National Review, the Los Angeles Business Journal, the Wall Street Journal, and the Daily Journal. He's spoken at LMA, ABA, and State Bar conferences, and has been the keynote speaker at numerous conferences on the topic of client development. He's a guest lecturer at the USC Marshall School of Business and at the UCLA School of Law. So without further ado, David, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to your members again today. We're going to be talking about effective client site visits, and it's an important topic because, as you all no doubt know, it is far easier to acquire new work from an existing client than to acquire new work from a new client. When you have an existing client, you've already proven your capabilities to that client. There's a relationship there. There's some trust that's been built. And so as law firms look out to the horizon to find opportunities for new business, they don't have to look very far. Most of the best opportunities for new matters are to be found in your client base. Now, you already know this, being at a law firm, but just in case you'd like to get some data to back this up, this is taken from a recent survey conducted by Thomson Reuters of 63 major law firms, and they asked the question, what concrete business development activities are thought to be the most effective and in terms of bringing in a return on the investment of time? And they used a 5-point scale to identify this, and 94% of the respondents rated existing client visits as the top most effective way to bring in new business in terms of yielding a return on the investment of time invested. You can see some of the others that also ranked well here. Relationship building, prospective client visits is also up there. But existing client visits is by far the best, is yielding the best results for at least these 63 law firms that were surveyed. And certainly in my 15+ years of experience at law firms, I found this to be true across the industry. So client site visits allow you to take a leadership role with your clients by proactively getting in front of them, learning about their problems, showing initiative. This is so important, especially because we find over and over again that lawyers tend to prefer to just hunker down, stay behind their desks, bill the hours, and work on the matters that are currently in their caseload. Now, that's critical behavior. That's absolutely one of the things that ensures a healthy practice, but at the same time, it's a rather short-sighted view if client development and business development are ultimately on the agenda, because both of those kinds of endeavors, whether it's client development, where we would define that as focusing on the clients themselves, or business development, which is more broad in terms of bringing in various kinds of business from both existing and prospective clients, both of those are proactive activities that require getting out from behind your desk. They require taking time away from servicing your clients so that you can start to plant the seeds that will germinate into new business down the road. So as we talk about a client site visit, what does that really entail? Well, it's literally going to the client site and paying them a visit is what it as it's described. That can either mean going to their corporate headquarters. It could mean going to the plant where they produce whatever product it is that they sell to their marketplace, and walking the floor. But it's literally an opportunity to meet the team, experience their culture, and assess their emerging needs. You will get information through a client site visit that you would not have gotten if you just sat by your phone and waited for them to call you with their next need. You'll be able to get in front of certain issues. You'll be able to anticipate needs more effectively, and you'll learn about your client's business. All of these are critical to keeping the client happy and keeping the client loyal, and to identifying new work opportunities through the client. So there's 6 components to an effective client site visit. We're going to go through all 6 of these in detail. Planning ahead, adding value, gathering intelligence, seeking out new relationships, incorporating social time, and the post-game assessment. So, number 1, plan ahead. So rather than just show up on the client side or talk to the client and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be in the area next month. I'd love to come by, maybe bring a couple of my partners, introduce them around so that you get a sense of some of the lawyers that are working on your matters or could potentially work on your matters. Is that okay with you? That would be really a less thoughtful way of doing this, because you haven't done the necessary planning. You really want to identify the specific outcome you intend to accomplish. This is not a, hey, I was in the neighborhood, let me pop by. This is much more about crafting a series of interactions that will produce an intended result. So as you start to identify the specific outcome that you intend to accomplish, and I'll give you some examples in a moment, it will inform the right team that you want to bring with you, both in terms of the kinds of personalities that will resonate with the client and the kinds of expertise that you want to make sure that team has, so that you're capturing as many opportunities and representing the firm in a way that's appropriate to the client. So here are some examples of specific goals or specific outcomes that you might seek to manifest through a client site visit. So it might be something like, what we really need to do here is expand our points of contact beyond the legal department. We know the legal department well because we've been working with the client on various matters. We've gotten to know key members of the legal department, but we have no relationships at the C-suite. We have no idea who the CEO is beyond just a name on the website. We've never met this person, and we really should make more of an effort of getting to know them. Or, we don't have any points of contact at the Board of Advisors. So we should probably, get some of those contacts established while we are on site. Perhaps to deepen the understanding of the company's roll-up strategy. Company is involved in buying up some of its competitors, and they haven't sent a lot of that work our way yet. Now, they keep talking about this, but we don't really know the extent to which they're involved in this roll-up strategy and how seriously they're taking it. So why don't we go on site, we'll talk to a few different people while we're on site. We can bring it up in casual conversation so that it doesn't feel too forced, because, this isn't something that they've sent to us yet. And that way we'll be able to get our arms around, what is this opportunity, is it real, and is it something that we can lock down as work for our firm. Perhaps it's something along the lines of, we really need to demonstrate the firm's capabilities in practice areas that we currently are not servicing for the client. So the client isn't sending any employment work our way, or they're sending certain kinds of litigation, but there's other kinds of litigation that are not coming our way. Do they even know that we have a number of partners over here in the tax department who would do a really good job for the client? We need to make sure that that practice area is on the client's radar. So that'll be one of the things that we target as an intended outcome. Perhaps it's to plant the seeds for the next site visit. We want to think ahead. We don't want this to just be a one-off. We want the client to start anticipating that at least twice a year we're going to come by in a way that's going to add value, in the way that the client is going to look forward to it, in a way that the client even perceives it as part of the service that we as a law firm provide to the client. So these are just some examples. Obviously, there are hundreds of these that are possible. You know your client best. You know the kind of work that you're getting and hopefully the kind of work you could be getting from the client best. So you're going to need to craft that specific outcome around the client and around the work that you want to get from the client. And each of these will require a specific plan of attack. Now, cross-selling is obviously one of the key objectives that you will probably have in mind with regard to how you can maximize the work opportunities through the client, and certainly one of the things that you would look to achieve through a client site visit. But make sure that you've done the proper analysis in advance of your visit. So for instance, you could use this service opportunity grid here. This is just a way of saying, all right, well, this is client number one. We're about to do a client site visit for client number one. They're currently sending us litigation, real estate, and M&A work, but they're not sending any other tax. Why is that? Well, we need to find out, and that's an opportunity for cross-selling, obviously, because surely they have quite a bit of tax work that they could send over to that practice area at our firm. And as we go down the list for other key clients, we see that for client number two, there's an opportunity in real estate and M&A. For client number three, there's tax and M&A, et cetera. So you know all of your various practice areas and the services that you provide. You know who clients 1 through 10 or 20 or however many of your clients you feel is appropriate to take through this analysis. But make sure you've done this analysis so that you know that before you visit client number one of the lawyers that you're bringing with you is from the tax group, and specifically you've asked some questions ahead of time to get a sense of what's going on in terms of the legal work in tax. Where is that currently going? And we'd like to bring one of our partners to make sure that you're getting all of your needs met in that area. Your finance marketing department can provide this information and can run this opportunity grid for you, so you can take a quick look at it before you head out to the next client site visit. By the way, this doesn't mean that your site visit is going to be a sales visit. This is not, it's not going to be appropriate for you to show up with an aggressive cross-selling agenda. No client is going to welcome that. But at the very least, you will be aware of where these potential opportunities are so that you can start to direct smart questions to the client, and you can start to identify some of the nuances that might be informing where that work is currently going or why it isn't coming to you. Now, as you look to identify the appropriate partners, keep a few things in mind. This is sometimes an uncomfortable topic because it speaks to your firm's culture, and not every firm has the healthiest culture when it comes to cross-selling. But make sure that the partners that you bring have the right kind of chemistry, that they are going to synergize nicely with the client contacts. You don't want someone to come along who is just not going to resonate with the client. If they have kind of an abrasive personality, or if they just don't tend to be very social, that could actually hurt your chances of the client sending that work over. The client's going to want to send work over to lawyers who they like. So make sure that you're selecting people who will be able to get along with the client from your estimation. Also, willingness. Avoid lawyers who are overprotective of their client relationships and are not generous when it comes to the whole notion of cross-selling. We all know that there are lawyers out there that are like this, and it's fine, but they are probably not going to be the ideal targets to bring with you on a client site visit if cross-selling is one of your objectives. Obviously, make sure that you have confidence in your partner's abilities and in their professionalism. One might say, well, that goes without saying, they work at our firm, but I think if you take a closer look at this, you'll recognize that not all of the lawyers at your firm have full faith in all of their partners. They may say, well, this lawyer is really good, that lawyer not so much. I really like, this particular bankruptcy partner's competence. I think that they're an excellent lawyer, but that one over there, he or she kind of gets by on personality. There are always those kinds of opinions going on in every law firm, and you want to make sure that the lawyers who are bringing their partners for the client site visit really feel strongly and believe in the competence of the team that they're bringing. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for them to convincingly cross-sell those partners into the client. partner must understand what you do so that they can cross-sell your services effectively. In other words, don't bring someone who is not able to cross-sell you in return. Make sure that you've sat down with them and that you have a pretty good sense of whether or not they can pitch your services effectively, because this person may find themselves in a conversation where you're not in the room, and this person probably has clients that you would want them to cross-sell you into. So the better you are able to make this a two-way street, the more successful it will be. And then finally, follow through. You know, this is something that a lot of lawyers struggle with good reason. They're overworked. They have too many emails coming into their inbox every day. It's impossible to get back to everybody who wants their attention. But to the extent possible, you want to prioritize those lawyers who have a good track record for follow-through, because otherwise you will introduce them to this client, and then the client will not have an experience of responsiveness, may not have an experience of you know, the same level of service that they've grown accustomed to through the relationship partner. So these are not reasons to avoid cross-selling. These are simply things for you to think about so that you have the right team in place, because the upside is definitely much more attractive than playing it safe and just letting the client call you rather than you proactively seeking the opportunities of the client. We'll get into some of that in a moment. Something that lawyers often bring up when it comes to the topic of client site visits is they will say, well, why would the client want me to come to their site? I mean, they're very busy. You know, they don't have time for me to just come to their office and tool around and ask questions and distract their team from the work at hand. And if that's all your client site visit entails, then you're absolutely right. No one is interested in a distraction. So what you want to do is position your client site visit as a value add. And you can do that by offering a CLE presentation to their legal department. Hey, listen, I know you've been struggling with this or that kind of litigation lately. We'd like to come in and do a presentation that will help you to avoid that kind of litigation in the future. Or, you know, there's a new regulation that will be impacting the way that you do business. We'd like to come in and make sure that you fully understand all of the various components of this regulation. Or perhaps it's a liability audit. We'd like to come in and take you through a checklist of various components of your business that we have seen can lead to liabilities. And we want to make sure that we've gone through that with you so that we can reduce those liabilities as much as possible. That's something that, you know, any client will see as a value add, because obviously they want to avoid liabilities. They want to avoid any areas where they feel that they might be vulnerable. And if you can help them do that by coming on site, talking to various people, and going through some sort of checklist, document review, whatever it might be, the due diligence that would be required in that through that kind of a process, that would be something that the client would welcome. Or even a secondment where, you know, we're going to come on site and we're just going to work with your team in your offices so that we can understand how the workflow is delegated, who is doing what, and we can make sure that we have strong relationships on site. That's something that, you know, again, they will value because you're doing work with them and for them in a context that helps you understand their culture and understand who the decision makers are when a particular matter comes up. While you're on site, you're going to want to gather intelligence. So this is one of the most important components of the client site visit. One could argue it's the most important. So as you're on site, ask each client contact to share their understanding of the company's strategic goals, how it intends to grow over the next 5 years, and potential challenges that stand in the way. You see, too many lawyers just stay focused on whatever the matter is that has been assigned to them or that they've been engaged to do. And obviously, again, that's very important. That's your job. However, to have that myopic a perspective of the client's needs means that you will be taken less seriously as a strategic advisor to the business. You're really positioning yourself as a hired gun if all you focus on are the issues that relate to the matter that you're working on. So you really do want to understand what this company's objectives are, where it's heading, so that all of your legal advice can be as strategic as possible. You can look downstream and you can help them to anticipate some of the problems that they might not even be aware that they could be heading into. The only way you're going to be able to do this is if you truly understand the business. Now, anytime I sit in on a panel of GCs who speak to their experience as clients to the law firm, one of the first complaints that they all cite is our clients just don't understand, or our law firms just don't understand our businesses very well. You know, we just wish that they would invest more resources in really understanding what it is that we do. Sure, they see that we're a tech company. Sure, they know that we're developing apps, but they've never actually worked with one of our apps. They've never downloaded one and actually tried to use it. It would be so helpful to us if we knew that our lawyers truly understand our products, truly understand our competitors, truly understand who's out there, rather than just waiting for us to call them and say, oh, somebody's filing a lawsuit against us, please get on this. So the only way you're going to be able to do that effectively is to really understand where the company is headed. Now, the other objection that sometimes lawyers will pose is, you know, the clients don't want us asking them questions about their business. They just want us to stay focused on the matter at hand. And, you know, depending on how you position that, I think that you'll find that you're pleasantly surprised by how much the client is waiting for you to ask broader questions. So the way you would position that is to just say, listen, I want to make sure that I am doing everything in my ability to provide you with the highest and most strategic level of legal service possible. So let me ask you some questions about where the company is headed and what are some of its strategic goals and what might some of the legal implications be given the kind of growth that you're anticipating and that you're planning. So again, these are the kinds of questions that a strategic advisor would ask and that I think a smart lawyer also owes it to him or herself to ask. You can also ask whether the organization is satisfied with current legal outsourcing. Now, this is a good opportunity to find out where there might be cross-selling opportunities. So, for instance, if you ask, you know, are you happy with the firms that you're currently outsourcing your legal work to? They will probably say, well, we're pretty happy with you, otherwise you wouldn't have been invited on site, and you wouldn't find that you are still working with that client. But they may also say, you know, we're happy with just about all the law firms. We have been sending some of our real estate work to a local boutique because some of the work here in town we needed to outsource, and you know, they are not as responsive as we'd like, or they don't really have the bench strength that we had hoped they would have. But otherwise, yes, we're happy with the outsourcing of our current legal needs. So that just gave you an opportunity to talk about your real estate practice group and to let them know that, you know, if they should ever like to meet any of those partners, that you'd be happy to make that introduction. And then again, you just want to make sure that all of their legal needs are being satisfied and that you're doing everything you can to ensure that the client will be successful in their business endeavors. Also, another item for gathering intelligence, you want to learn who the key decision makers are at the company and whether the culture at the company embraces change. This is really important because change is what precedes legal work. So if a company wants to grow, that implies legal work. If they're going to shrink, that implies legal work. If they're going to acquire somebody, that implies legal work. In fact, if a company decides, you know, we're going to do nothing different all year long, we're just going to completely maintain status quo, that will minimize the legal work that will likely come your way. So the more you understand the kinds of changes that the company is planning, the more you can start to anticipate the kinds of legal needs that will potentially come your way. And also understanding who the key decision makers are, that's really important. You may just assume, well, of course, it's the GC who's going to delegate the legal work out to me, but you may start to realize after you've asked some questions that actually procurement has a lot more to do with where the legal work is being sent than you realized, or perhaps the deputy GC is the one who's getting delegated that kind of decision making. The GC is too busy overseeing to really get into the kinds of nitty-gritty on who gets what kind of work. So again, these are the kinds of things that you want to make sure that you have your head around because they will influence the way that you navigate the client relationship. Also, ask the client about their pain points. In other words, what keeps you up at night? What are those business pain points, the things that are most challenging to your business? The more of these you identify, the better you'll be able to pitch solutions that the client cares about. See, what you don't want to do is say, hey, we just prepared another employment CLE on wage and hour, and we thought we would bring that in and present it to you. They might not care about that. They might feel like they already know what there is to know about it. What they're really worried about is sexual harassment, because there have been two near misses, if you will, in the last few months, and they are starting to worry about the degree to which their current policies and procedures are protecting them and the degree to which they have done sufficient educating on site. So if you start to ask the kinds of questions that help you identify that, again, these are not matters yet, and so they haven't called you about them, but they have been issues that certainly have the HR department talking, then you can bring something in that they're going to be much more interested in hearing about. And they'll certainly be much more grateful to you for listening to their needs before you pitch them a CLE presentation. Also, seek opportunities to gather feedback on the client's satisfaction with your firm's performance. Now, if you have a formal client feedback initiative in place, then I applaud you. You are unfortunately one of the few firms that has the courage to do this. I will say that most firms fear going down this road because they are concerned that the client, it may, as we say, kick the sleeping dog, right? If you ask a question that gives the client an opportunity to complain about you, then you're probably better off not having asked the question. But the truth is, most of the time when a firm does a client service interview, what they learn is that the firm is very happy with them. There's maybe one or two little nuances that need to be addressed, but for the most part, the client is happy with the firm. If they weren't, then you would start to see less and less work from that client, and eventually you'd find that the client's just not working with you anymore. There are too many options that the client has in today's marketplace for them to continue to work with a firm that they're truly not happy with. So that really is not a concern that your firm needs to engage in. But what you will learn is that there may be little things that the client wants you to do in the future that can help to secure and solidify your relationship with them. And it will also improve the degree to which that client is loyal to you because you bothered to ask. A lot of times the client just wants to talk through some of their concerns or some of their potential concerns so that they've had a chance to get it off their chest. And once you listen to that, you say, great, thank you for sharing those points with me. We'll definitely keep that in mind. You'll find that the relationship has improved considerably just by virtue of you having been open to the conversation. While you're on site, seek out new relationships. This is so important. You won't be able to do this as effectively unless you're on site. Again, if you're just in that reactive mode where you're waiting for them to call you with a problem, you will not be able to develop the kind of network through the client as you would if you were on site. And as you do so, seek out people who share your demographic. So if you're, a senior associate and you're being brought along on the client site visit, then seek out other people who are in that same age bracket as you are. You're just going to find that it's a lot easier for you to connect with them and make friends with them than if they're 20 years your senior. Same is true if you're a baby boomer. Seek out the leadership. Seek out the people who are at your age bracket because, again, you'll find that it's a lot easier to create friendships and meaningful relationships when you have more in common. If you are a younger lawyer and you're looking to meet the GC, looking to identify some of the leaders at the organization that you can add to your network. Obviously, you want to make sure that the relationship partner that is at your firm is comfortable with this. But one of the most effective ways to do this is to ask the GC, listen, I've only been working on your account for a few years. I'm fairly new to the firm. I'm only in my 7th year as a lawyer, but I'd really like to get a better understanding of the company and to glean some of the institutional knowledge that you've acquired over the last few decades in working with the company. Would you be open to just a 10-minute conversation so I can ask you some questions about your rise to your role as GC and how you view the company's priorities from your perspective? most GCs would be happy to spend the 10 minutes with you. It's flattering. It's a little bit of mentorship. Most lawyers like that kind of thing. It appeals to their sense of service and frankly, a little bit to their egos. And so it's a fine way of making that proposition. And, worst case scenario, the GC is, you know what, I'm just too busy. I don't have time for that. But, I certainly appreciate you asking. It certainly won't hurt you to put that out there. Also, as you're seeking out new relationships, one of the best ways to do this is to ask to meet the company's other service providers. Who are the company's accountants and consultants? Who is that consulting firm that helped you with that 5-year strategic plan you were telling me about? Who is doing your financial audit, given some of the changes that are coming down the pipe? Who has conducted the valuation for the company that you're acquiring? All of these service providers are potential referral sources to your firm. Why? Well, first of all, you already share a client. So you know that there's good synergy there with the referral source. Also, when the introduction comes through the client, that referral source is much more likely to take it seriously and to keep you in mind for future opportunities. So ask to meet the company's other service providers. The company, your client, will have no issue in making that introduction. You can even be very transparent about it. You can say, listen, the more of your advisors I know, the more strategic I'll be able to be in terms of understanding all of the various components of how your company is outsourcing its needs and how it is continuing to thrive. And frankly, it's a good, if you've vetted this advisor, then that's a good contact for me, because I want to meet as many people who are, quality business professionals as possible, especially if I know that they're working with you. So the client will have no issue in making that introduction for you. As you're seeking out new relationships, ask to meet the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, the VP of sales, marketing. All of those leadership roles should be contacts that you make, and let me tell you why. So we all know that there's a bit of a revolving door in legal departments, whereby, a GC may come in and 4 years later they've been either recruited to another company, or the CEO has changed and and brings a new GC with them. And so, if you only have 1 or 2 points of contact in the legal department at the leadership level, then your client is very vulnerable to the kinds of sea changes that simply occur over time. So it would be very helpful for you to also have a connection to the CFO or the CEO, or as many people in leadership as possible, because then if you learn that the GC is about to exit the company, you can pick up the phone, you can call the CEO, and you can say, hey, I just want to make sure that, we have an opportunity to meet the new GC and that our position with the company is secure. Tell us what we can do to ensure that. You have no recourse if the GC leaves the company, a new GC comes in, and they decide to bring in their favorite law firm. You will find yourself very quickly being ushered out the door in that circumstance. So while you're on site, say, hey, listen, I'd really like to meet the CEO of the company. I really admire the kind of work you guys are doing here. Is that person available? And there's a good chance that they'll say, well, no, they're very busy, or there's just as good a chance that they'll say, right, they're right down the hall here. Come on, I'll make a quick introduction. You pop your head in the door. Hi, I want to introduce you to Sally. She's with the law firm that we've been sending a lot of our litigation to. The CEO stands up. Oh, Sally, thank you for all of your hard work. We really appreciate you helping us stay out of trouble. You exchange business cards, and you follow up with Sally and maintain some contact, or follow up with the CEO to maintain some contact. But this kind of scenario is oftentimes a lot easier than you would think, and it simply comes down to you making the ask when you're on site. Number 5, incorporate social time. So this is an important component, obviously, and one that you could consider toward the end of your client site visit. So my preference is to do these sorts of things as a dinner rather than as a lunch, because over dinner you have an opportunity to, really relax, have a bottle of wine, have a nice dinner with the client contacts that you've made, or the client contacts that you've just made during your client site visit. And that's where you can really leverage all of this information that you've collected about the company's goals, about whether or not they're satisfied with their current outsourcing of legal needs, and so on, and talk to them a little bit more in an informal setting about the implications to your firm. So one other thing that you can use this time for is to interview for the GET. The GET is short for the gesture of extraordinary thoughtfulness. And the reason that you would do this is because you want to deepen your relationship with these people as quickly as possible. Now, one thing that we know tends to deepen relationship is time, right? But in many cases, you've just met some of these people today, or you've only been working with the client for 6 months. And the only time you spend with the client is centered around whether there's a matter that they have engaged you for. Otherwise, there isn't much contact with the client. So you really want to maximize something like a dinner during your on-site client site visit. And the GET is a great way of doing that. So the way that you interview for the GET is, I'll tell you a quick story. This is how I learned this technique. I was having lunch with a partner at a large law firm who'd been introduced to me through a mutual friend. So, you know, this is one of these typical networking lunches. I sit down with the gentleman, and we do what most people do during the first 20 minutes of these kinds of lunches. So tell me a little about yourself, and are you originally from the area, and, you know, do you have any kids, and gosh, wasn't traffic terrible today, and are you going to watch the game this weekend, you know, that kind of chit-chat. And, you know, tell me a little bit more about what you do, and getting a sense of the business profiles that each of us have. And then he did something very interesting about 20 minutes into the lunch. He said, David, you know, I've gotten a sense now of, you know, what you do professionally and a little bit of your background. That's all helpful, thank you. But you know what I really want to know? I want to know what you do on the weekends. What do you do for fun? And I said, oh, okay, well, that's great. I appreciate you asking. My wife and I, you know, we don't have kids, and so we tend to go to a lot of movies on the weekends. And, you know, we go to the movie theater. We love that. And he says, oh, interesting. What kind of movies do you like to watch? And I said, well, I have to confess, I'm a little bit of a science fiction geek. So I like superhero movies and movies with aliens and spaceships and dragons, all that stuff. I'm really excited about that kind of show. And my wife will, I drag my wife along to these things, and she's happy to go because she loves me. So he says, okay, very interesting. What kind of science fiction do you like to watch? And now I started to get excited because I thought, oh, this guy also likes science fiction. Great, we can talk about science fiction movies. This will be a fun lunch. So I started telling him all of my favorite science fiction movies. And then I said, you know, have you watched any of these movies? Do you like these movies? He says, no, I don't particularly have a taste for science fiction. I said, oh, okay. He says, no, I want to get to know you better. So tell me, do you also read science fiction? And I thought to myself, oh, this is one of those guys who doesn't watch the movies, but he likes to read the science fiction books. So I started telling him about the science fiction books that I like to read. And I asked him what he likes to read in terms of science fiction. He says, nope, I really don't have any taste for science fiction. He says, I just want to get to know you. And I thought to myself, you know, what an interesting guy. He's really willing to be interested in me, even though what I'm talking about isn't a topic that interests him. And I was very impressed with what a gentleman, what a classy guy he was for navigating the lunch in this way. Or at least that's what I thought he was doing. Until 2 days later, I received an email from him. He said, David, thank you so much for our lunch. I really appreciated getting to know you. And I bought one of your favorite science fiction books on Amazon, and it's headed to my doorstep. And so I look forward to reading that. You know, as I said, I don't really have a taste for science fiction, but you seemed so passionate about it, and I was impressed with you. So I thought, all right, I'll give this another try. Now, you didn't ask me what kind of book I like to read, but I really enjoy biographies. So I have included a few of my favorite biographies in this email, as well as an Amazon store credit for $20. Feel free to buy any of these books that you like with that money, and maybe the next time we meet, we can exchange notes on what we thought of each other's favorite book. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Spend the $20 however you like. It was a pleasure, you know, getting to know you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. So that was John's follow-up email to me, and I was simultaneously moved and mortified. I was so embarrassed that I hadn't asked him what his favorite book was, so he taught me a great lesson there in terms of, reciprocating that level of interest. But I was also very touched by this gesture. Granted, he didn't spend a lot of time or money on the email. It was just a couple of minutes on Amazon and a $20 investment. But I thought it was such a thoughtful thing for him to do that he instantly went to the top of the list of lawyers that I would want to send a referral to. So it was a very effective move on his part in accelerating the relationship, because I know a whole bunch of lawyers who do exactly what he does. But in the moment that I received that email, I felt very close to him. I really wanted to help him. I really wanted to balance the scales, given how generous and thoughtful he had been with me. So that was his gesture of extraordinary thoughtfulness. And I encourage you, as you are speaking to new contacts, especially contacts that you have some sort of investment in, to follow up with that kind of gesture, because it accelerates the relationship. It puts you in a position where you're really listening from a different place. You're not just listening, like I'm going to wait for my turn to say something in this conversation. A part of your brain is listening because you're looking for an opportunity to follow up with some sort of gesture that will help to solidify this relationship and communicate to the person that you really cared about what they had to say, and you are investing in this relationship more long term. So hopefully that technique is helpful to you and gives you some ideas the next time you're networking with a client or even a referral source. You also want to propose ideas for your next site visit during this dinner that you have with your clients, because again, you want to plant the seeds so that they start to consider this as a regular affair. Every 6 months or so, our law firm is going to come on site, they're going to do a presentation, they're going to ask us some questions, they're going to get some feedback, and then we're going to have a really nice dinner at the end of the day. So those are all, the kinds of things that you can discuss during this dinner. And then finally, the post-game follow-up. So always schedule time in your calendar for a follow-up, preferably within a day or two of the site visit. What that means is you're going to connect with any new contacts on LinkedIn, add them to CRM. So, I met 2 or 3 people from the legal department, and I met the CEO of the company. All of those will go into your database. Send a get when appropriate. If you interviewed any of those people for a get, you have an idea for a good follow-on gesture, then make sure you send that in a timely manner. Start planting seeds for the next site visit in your communication with the client, and meet with your client team and assess your effectiveness against those goals you initially agreed upon. Remember, number 1 was plan ahead, and you were going to identify some specific outcomes. Did you accomplish them? Make sure that you meet with your client team and have that discussion. If you didn't receive any new work, consider how you can gather more pain points next time. This is really an important step, because a lot of times, the lawyers get back to their office, they've been out of the office all day on this client site visit, or maybe it's been 2 days because there was some travel involved, and they, suddenly have all of these emails they have to answer and all of these other items that need their attention, and they forget to do the kind of follow-up and post-game assessment that makes the client site visit really worthwhile. The client site visit is a significant investment of the firm's resources, given the amount of time that you're going to be out of pocket, and the fact that it probably will involve some travel, maybe a hotel, whatever other T&E expenses could be involved there. So make sure that you make the most of that investment through your analysis of the results that you got from it. So those are the 6 components of a client site visit. I want to give us some time for Q&A. We have about 15 minutes, and we may even wrap up a little bit early today, depending on how many questions you have. But hopefully I've made a case for the importance of the client site visit, not just doing one, but doing one in a thorough and thoughtful fashion, so that you maximize the client development opportunity that you have when you engage in a client site visit.
David, thanks so much. That was great. I'll just remind everybody, if they have any questions, to include them in the chat box on their screen. I do have one that came in, and obviously we have a group here that's very international. We've got people from several different countries on the line. And the question that came in is, have you had experience with cultural differences when it comes to making these site visits, and how that impacts both the expectations involved in the site visit and this, what you were just speaking about, the sort of social side of it as well?
Yes, it's a great question, so important. It goes back to number one. Here, I'm just going to file back here because I want to make sure that all 6 of these items are easily found for us. But, number one is really about planning ahead, and part of planning ahead is identifying the right team to bring with you on a client site visit. And, this is why law firm diversity is an initiative that, especially in the United States, so many law firms are really focused on, but I think it's becoming an international issue very quickly for this reason, which is that when you have lawyers that share the same culture and share the same understanding of the client, then you increase your chances of being able to have relevant conversations with them, and you also decrease the chances of accidentally saying something or doing something that the client might not understand or worse, might find offensive. These kinds of cultural disconnects can happen quite often between law firms and their clients. So as you're putting the team together, I think it's important to include someone in the team who shares the same culture with the client, if possible, because, that person can sort of act as a cultural liaison. By the way, this could be an associate, this could be a younger lawyer. It's fine. I think the client will appreciate that you're making some effort in ensuring that there is a cultural bridge, if you will, between your organizations. Now, at the same time, I want to caution law firms against doing this on a more cosmetic level. So sometimes what we'll see is law firms put together a team to do a client site visit, and the GC is perhaps African American. And so they make sure that there's one African American lawyer on the client team, even though that lawyer doesn't have a lot to contribute to the client's matters. They're just there as sort of for the optics, for the window dressing. And, your GCs are not stupid. They see what you're doing, and the ones that I've spoken to don't really appreciate that. So there isn't a real cultural benefit there in trying to put together a team that says, hey, we've got somebody on our team that's kind of like you. But where you have a real cultural difference, perhaps between, an Asian law firm and a European client or vice versa, then it really is important to bring someone who understands the culture of the client and who can ideally speak their language and who can navigate for the rest of the team the kinds of considerations that will help that client site visit be more appropriate, more respectful, and more effective than it would otherwise be. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Thank you. I don't see any other questions coming through, so I'll just remind everybody that they can reach out to you directly if they have questions, or they can reach out to me and I'll put them in touch with you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And
we'll also email up here again in case anybody wants to see it. And obviously, reaching out through you is also a great way to contact me. And Lindsay, I just appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully this means we've done a very thorough job with this topic. And obviously, if questions come up later, feel free to let us know.
Great, thank you. And we'll be sharing the slides from this presentation as well. And we invite everybody to join us for our next 2 webinars with David. We have one coming up in July and one in August. On July 14th, David will be speaking on building a powerful referral network. And on July 11th, he'll present on how to motivate the next generation of rainmakers. So thanks to everybody for your time and participation today.